is today. And then map out who are the people that are involved in that process, right? What's the general, it's even little things like what's the generational disposition, right? Are they, like I remember talking to a friend of mine not too long ago, because I'm still searching for that startup venture that I'm going to start. And I remember talking to him, he's got a pretty large security budget. And I said, what can I build for you? And I started rattling off a bunch of tech, and I think 15, 20 minutes ago, he stopped me and said, look, my biggest problem right now is my people. I'm moving them from a traditional network mindset to a DevOps, SecOps mindset. I'm replacing a third, I'm retraining a third. Help me with that. Right, and to me, now that he's gotten kind of a different cultural mindset in place, now that's driving new tools. Because there's a lot of systems out there that have very old tech stacks, right? They're not microservices oriented, they're very old, they've been created for old processes. So I think that when you think of it, okay, there's a new process changing, people are changing, now what does that mean from a tool perspective? And then figure out how you can inject AI, machine learning, blockchain, pick your acronym, right? And to me, I did it backwards, and what I would suggest is to kind of do it from starting with a problem on down. One way, and those are just my lessons that I've learned. You follow your own journey, follow your own path. But to me, now that I've been following kind of this process, and as I'm looking at company concepts to start, it's becoming a lot more streamlined. And what I realize is that if you can explain it in 30 seconds and it's really easy, then you're onto something. If you start spilling out a bunch of acronyms, proof of work, proof of stake, blah, 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 it's like, what? Then I think that's a signal that you need to kind of reconsider. Make sense?
Yep.
All right, so I'm happy to share a lot more lessons and happy to have out-of-band conversations on things that might be helpful to you. But my intention is to be here and to kind of help you learn from my mistakes, and so you can go make your own. Any questions? Yes?
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation, that was awesome. So there's one use case for which the answer to all of this is actually yes, and that has turned out to be the killer app for blockchain, right? And that is the use case for raising capital.
For what?
For raising capital, for money, right? I think the reason why tokens have become so popular, people want to do apps on blockchain, is the very simple fact that it bypasses VC and allows you to raise, tens of millions of dollars from a community that's already loaded on Bitcoin and Ethereum, and they have big positions, so they actually can afford money. So there's the suspicion that a lot of us have that capital raising is actually the killer app for blockchain. And a lot of the other things that we talk about, especially on the enterprise blockchain stuff, is overhyped and overstated to the point that it's kind of like a house of cards. So this is the negative view on it, right? I don't know if it's valid or not, but what would be your take on that?
So I've heard of the argument that the killer application is raising capital, and I've had people say, hey, let's go do a token launch. And I would say, around what? It's like, who cares, just do a white paper, raise money. That didn't make me feel very good about doing something like that. It feels very pumping dovish to me. And I guess, do we have any VCs in the room? Okay. I think the whole theory or intent behind getting venture capital is that you should be getting a partner with smart money that can provide you operational expertise and guidance, right? I look at things, again, this is one person's perspective, but I look at things like IPFS. Do you guys know that I guess company or project? It's raised at I think several hundred million. And it's like 5, 6 people, and it's distributed storage, so you can use the blockchain to store information there. And I just really have a tough time with that, because I worked in a company. One of the board members used to report directly to Bezos. I think he still does. And I remember him telling me a story that in AWS, their whole intention long term was to push a feature out every second. So I wonder, like, okay, here's a centralized organization of Amazon, AWS, powerhouse. Why is this like team of 5 or 6 people with some kind of community around IPFS going to take on such a behemoth? And yet they have all this money, and from a fiduciary responsibility perspective, how do you return value on that capital? So whenever I ask those questions, I don't get very comfortable answers from people that are like, let's just go out and get tokens and raise money. There's another company that I found really interesting. I almost put money in, but I backed off at last minute. But and I really like the concept where they were creating. They found a use case for developing nations. I remember growing up in Bolivia when we would go back after the military dictatorship was over, and there'd be hyperinflation. And I remember my family going to the black markets and buying and selling dollars and so forth. And what they had done is they actually worked a kind of a hack where they could do kind of micro remittance for countries like Venezuela. So Venezuelan citizens could, in theory, now go out and actually through an online portal and folks locally get their Venezuelan currency out and then get access to U.S. banks. But they were using things like Bitcoin and blockchain in the back end, which I found really interesting. But then as you kind of drilled in from a typical due diligence perspective, like what are your per unit economics, what's your cost structure, what's your margin profile, they fell a little bit short in getting funding from traditional VCs. And maybe at some point they could, but then they were supposed to do an ICO, and it didn't have the discipline that you would want from an investor. And when I look at whether you're doing an ICO or raising it from a rich VC or raising it from a grandmother, I think there's a tremendous amount of fiduciary responsibility that you take that dollar in, you better have confidence you're going to be able to provide some kind of rate of return. And I'm not necessarily, from my perspective, I haven't necessarily seen that level of discipline. So that's why, to me, that's great that you can raise money from ICOs, but I don't necessarily know if that's a killer app. I wonder when that party's going to end.
Right. No, I think just to follow up on that, if we decouple the two, as you can raise money through blockchain, crowdfunding, but then the problem that you solve need not be solved on the blockchain, that you're actually building a centralized app. I feel like that could possibly address this to some extent, because I think what's happening is people are raising money, and because they said we do it on the blockchain, they feel forced to build an application on the blockchain that doesn't scale, that doesn't work. But then if you're at least honest about it and say that, hey, I'm using this as a new funding model, but then I have to build an app that actually works for someone, that actually creates value, and maybe I actually need a board to help me manage this money, then make this demarcation between using something as a tool for raising capital, but still doing the right thing to solve problems and have a genuine business model.
It's a thesis. I think it'll be interesting to see a proof point that validates that thesis. I haven't seen it, but doesn't mean it's not out there. Yes?
So you give a nice logistics example where blockchain makes sense. What are the other problems that you think can be solved with blockchain and which cannot be solved with traditional methods that you have right now?
I don't know of a killer app. I mean, if I felt comfortable with one, I probably would go out and build it. I mean, I have some interesting things, like there was a company that's been around. They created their own, what they call private blockchain. They're being used in Estonia for kind of powering the whole digital ID framework and system there. When I have people look at it, it's like, oh, it's no different than like than Tripwire, right? It's just being able to actually have a different approach to actually ensuring and tracking of all these activities. You don't necessarily need blockchain for that. So that's the technical due diligence I got from certain people looking at it, but the company was getting some momentum success on that application and use case. I still think like things like supply chain, I mean, what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac do on the back end could benefit from blockchain. I think my wife works for a health tech company. I think she provided, there was an interesting stat there where it's like, I think for every dollar we get billed, I think they spend like 40 cents on all this back-end stuff. There's some ungodly number like that, because a lot of those systems are so arcane. If you look at the health tech industry as a general class, there's such a massive technical deficit. It's such a large portion of our GDP spend here in this country, and a lot of the old players like Blue Cross, they operate in a massive technical deficit, right? Because think of those companies, are they really, you're an engineer and you can go work at Google, Facebook, or Aetna? Right? So they're not necessarily going to be able to attract that kind of talent, so they think there's opportunities there. But again, back to my point about culture, right? Companies like Google have a culture where it's like fail fast, fail quickly. Aetna is like not that culture, right? And if anyone's here from Aetna, I apologize. I mean, that'd be offensive. But it's a different type of disposition. So I think maybe there's an opportunity to create a next generation Aetna that all powered by blockchain. I don't know. Right, but to me, blockchain is not the end, it's the means to the end. It's what the end is, what category are you in, what business are you in? And maybe things like AI or machine learning and blockchain can help solve those problems.
Do you think that cryptocurrencies solve a problem that couldn't have been solved before?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you think that cryptocurrencies solve a problem that was not solvable before?
I mean, there's certainly, I think that, I try to always stay true to my roots of being some poor little Bolivian kid, right? When I go back to developing nations, I realize how much ethnocentrism there is in the valley. We tend to create, tools and apps for the on-demand delivery for weed service or like bikes or whatever, right? But there's still a lot of needs in developing nations of like, I just want stability in my currency, right? Or I want to be able to get paid in a reliable way. I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and I think provincial cryptocurrency addresses some of those use cases. I certainly, looking at that one company, I got an appreciation of how they were able to kind of do those micro-remittance capabilities. But I think it just needs a lot more exploration. And I'm not necessarily tainted or bitter or skewed. I mean, I've gambled a little bit of cryptocurrency myself, but what I've seen is that there are definitely some market makers there that are playing at a whole different level. And I even talked to a few folks about like, can we do some things that were done back in the 1920s just to make money, but it's not, for me, it doesn't move me. I want to do something a little different that's much more impactful. But there are a few folks there that have control of the crypto markets, and they're gonna, I think, do things to jack up the value. Now, you talk to Warren Buffett, I don't know Warren Buffett personally, but from what I read, he's like, I don't get this cryptocurrency stuff. So he kind of seems like a smart guy, right? So you got to put some weight to that.
He's not vested either.
And what's that?
He's not vested in it, so.
He's not vested.
Believe it.
Yeah.
And he was the same way about IBM, I don't need to buy that. He was the same way about IBM, right? And now he's a big investor in IBM.
Yeah, he's a value investor,
And
right?
I believe he's a big investor in Apple, right? Same guy who told us all, don't invest in tech. 5 years ago.
That's the counterpoint, right? That's the counterpoint.
I mean, I see you all of this smart guy, very intelligent, highly respected, but he didn't invest. He's speaking his book.
That's a counterpoint, and that's why to me, I'm not trying to be like a politician, right? But I think there's two views to all these situations, and I think there's opportunity there. It's just what plays to you, right? And go take those risks and go learn on your own. Yes.
Just as a use case where you have.
Wait, mic off.
All right, I'll
Hey,
try to speak louder.
Can you
Just a use case, we are working with a diamond company, they're jewelry, let's put it that way. They're seeing their customers, more the millennials, who are asking for how much blood is on the diamond. The supply chain which you talked about, so there are two interfaces. One, the blood definitely exists in Sierra Leone, and second, when it goes for diamond polishing in India, child labor. What challenges in your experience, when you mentioned the real challenges are not technology, but political, right?
Yeah, so there's, I don't know if we're talking about the same company, but there's one company that's been using Hyperledger.
Yes.
Right, so IBM's really promoting them, and it took me a while. Again, this is just my thesis. I don't work for IBM. Anyone here from IBM? I mean, perfect. So maybe you could provide some perspective.
No, I don't have, but I had a discussion with IBM Hyperledger integration on our company. So the same example, like I have similar questions on that lines.
Well, but here's the interesting thing. So IBM Azure, we were working closely with Azure on this blockchain as a service thing, and IBM would be touting this little jewelry company that can track provenance of conflict minerals, diamonds, all the way to the millennials task, right? And I just struggled to kind of like, okay, so is this a product, feature, or company? Or rather, feature, product, or company? What's stopping SAP from doing this? And it kind of dawned on me after talking to some of the IBM folks, again, just my perspective, it's like, if I'm IBM and I'm trying to compete for cloud consumption against AWS and Azure, and I really make money on cloud, try to get as much adoption on blockchain as you can, and I can throw a bunch of consultants at the problem. And a lot of these POCs, IBM's just providing free consultants that any other company would spend millions upon. So to me, I think blockchain is a means to an end to actually drive more cloud consumption. Right, and I think use cases like this, again, it's almost like, okay, you extract the diamond from the mine, how do you tag it? Right, how do you, that's one of the things that we did at Cisco, is like, you gotta use nanotechnology to tag it, but then now you still gotta transport it into the digital chain. But if you can't get that first mile, then, right, so it's the same problem with ID. I love that, one of my initial theses was like, wow, go after the digital ID problem, like, put it in a blockchain. What if we all had universal ID? And there's like a concept called UPort. There's tons of companies that are trying to do this. But like, okay, so I enter that I'm, a John Stewart. But how do you actually verify that, right? So that first mile challenge. So blockchain is not the problem itself, right? It's not. There's a lot more to that. Like, and ideally, like I'd ask myself, do I want to be in an identity business? Like, what business do I want to be in? Again, I admit, I got punch drunk in technology, and I would just caution, when you find if you're looking for a new venture, find your mission statement that moves you personally, the problem you're trying to solve. If you're looking to bring some technologies to innovate internally, how does it provide some unique benefit and differentiation to your platform and can complement your AI, machine learning, or whatever you have? And just kind of contextualize it that way. And ultimately just, what's the problem and what's the process that you're looking to optimize?
Hi, this is related to the same example. So when I have a discussion with the IBM folks, is one of the things is any blockchain transaction, we need to store the supporting documents as well. For example, if a diamond is taken out at the very first stage, they will take a photo of it and store it somewhere. So right now, they are sometimes, like most of the times, they store it in the Namu machines. So how these references works out, because I'm from a cloud storage perspective, so I'm thinking of how can I enhance my product to match those kind of use cases. So I wanted to get your opinion on all the supporting documents for the transaction, because we cannot store images into the blocks. It's going to be expensive. So how these supporting documents and supporting artifacts will be referenced from a blockchain?
So I'm not going to be the best person to answer the technical questions. I surrounded myself with people that are